Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Eclectic Book Talk. Today, we bring to you a very special mother daughter duo who are readers themselves and, in their own might, promote reading as a habit. So, we talk about books, we talk about reading, career shifts, and even how a casual act of reading can, in a way, change the script of your life with a live example. So, without further delay, let me introduce you to Shreya Punj, who has been an engineer, an editor with topmost Indian publishing houses, and now is finally going to be heading the audiobook section for Pocket FM. Along with her, we have her mother, Mrs. Indu Punj, who also is the founder of Stories Matter. And together, we are going to be discussing, like I said, books, reading, and all things bookish. So, my first question is to Shreya ma'am. Can you please run us through your career graph?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you so much for having my mom and I here. So delighted to be in conversation with you, Lopa. Okay, so as far as my career graph is concerned, you said it. I was an engineer. Decided that wasn't for me. Did a postgraduate diploma in journalism and mass comm. I worked as a journalist for about a year, after which I joined publishing and I was at Harper Collins. Then I was at Penguin. And now I am going to Pocket FM, which is a startup which sits right between technology and books, which is my happy spot. So very excited about working on audiobooks. And in these 7 years, I've published countless bestsellers, worked with some of the best names in the industry, and created some wonderful books which have been loved by a lot of people.
Oh, so you're trying to tell me that with a formal degree in an education in engineering, you spend more time as an editor in the publishing industry. So what was it? Was it your own command on the language, or how did this magical shift happen?
So honestly, it wasn't magic. Around my third year, I realized that the only language I had any command over was not C or C++ or Python. It was plain simple English. And that degree of self-awareness is required to, navigate your career in any direction and to know where your strengths lie. So I asked myself, okay, you know English, you like to read, how can you make this a career? And I did a lot of research. Thankfully, I had my parents who were very supportive because I told them that, boss, ye to nahi hoga. And they said, okay, you know what, you've given this your best shot. Go ahead and do what you want to do now. We'd be very happy to support you. So the art of editing, the basics were taught to me at my diploma, or my postgraduate diploma, where I had some of the best journalists and editors like Shekhar Bhatia teach us how to edit. And I had Joseph who taught us how to do an investigative piece. I had I had a host of these kinds of teachers. There was King Shuk sir who taught us how to make a copy beautiful. So from these people, I learned how to edit properly and what to look out for. It was an intensive course. And then I anyway loved the language, not just books for the sake of entertainment. So it was a very natural progression.
So, in all of this, can you please tell me what role did reading play in this? What were you reading while you grew up?
I would read anything, honestly. If there was nothing to read, I could even read what was in the back of a ketchup bottle. Mostly I read fiction. Okay. But genuinely, I would read the newspaper from cover to cover when we had a newspaper coming. I would obviously read all my textbooks as well, including maths. But I would read it, not solve it. And I would read everything that was in the library. The librarian in my schools used to be my best friend. I still remember there was Pratap ma'am, and I had gone to her with my first ever Sydney Sheldon in class 8. And I said, I really want to read this. She said that, Shreya, this is for adults. And I said, I have read everything else you have in the library or in fiction. and she let me read Sidney Sheldon. But she said the caveat was only in school, because she said if you take it home and your parents see that I have allowed you to read Sidney Sheldon at the age of whatever, you're in class 8, they're going to complain. So, and then I discussed the plot with her, including how graphic the sex scenes were or how violent it was. So I've always had a very good equation with my librarians, and yeah, I've just read too many books.
So, Mrs. Punj, how was your reaction to this? Like, nobody knows कि ठीक है मेरी बच्ची novels पढ़ रही है तो एक दिन editor बन जाएगी. So, how did you react if Shreya ma'am would not probably read novels in her textbooks? And what was your reaction? Were you like all cool about it, or was it like like a normal parent?
Yes, as you've rightly expected any other mother to behave in that scenario, I would just scream कि क्या पढ़ रही हो class 12th board exams में, and I would pick up a novel from her chemistry book. And yesterday only I was telling her I had been caught the same way by my father, so it is, I think, in the
running in the genes.
running in the family. And the best mama जो किताब के अंदर रख के पढ़ा था, that helped me more than the actual textbooks. So we are very happy she was reading it, but of course the reaction was very, very normal of any other mother, the way she would have done in that scenario. Also, she's always been scoring very well in her academics as well. So we never had much complaints about it. She's always been a brilliant student. Even in her engineering, she did so well, despite the fact she didn't like it.
So, Mrs. Punj, how did you go from a parent who was pulling books from under textbooks to being so supportive, and Shreya ma'am was like, "बस अब तो नहीं हो रही engineering हमसे." क्या shift हो गया? क्या change हो गया आपने?
She had started writing at an early age. She was already writing all my scripts for my assemblies. I have always been a teacher. She was right from class 4, 6 onwards, she was writing scripts for me. And I always believed in her ability much more than my own self. Till today, she is actually, it's the other way around. I am taking every guidance from her. And so this was already in making her story. Her poems were getting published, and if it was tsunami, she had written a poem. So we were already aware of her. I would say we were very confident that she would do very well in this, and that time we never objected, because we had already realized our mistake by then, and my husband had seen that 3 Idiots, so that changed his perspective as well.
The art is very important.
Yes, even movie 3 Idiots, I think every parent was kind of jolted, and जब इसने हमें बताया तो we were not surprised, and we were actually, I was very happy कि finally वो कर रही है जो वो करना चाहती. So with that decision, both of us as parents were very happy. We never objected that time.
I'll tell you one way to not have parents object, and in their objection just lies their fear for you, is to quell that fear. You need to show them what this career entails, what it means in terms of your satisfaction as a person pursuing it. What is the trade-off between, say, money versus time versus effort versus fame, all those trade-offs. Once you explain it to them logically, I think most parents would be easy conversions, because they are basing their trust in your decision off of your confidence. Now, if you sound shaky, if you sound ill-prepared, if you sound like you don't know what you're doing, there is a chance
and
that they
also,
might...
can they see that skill set in you? You want to be some astronaut.
They might not see the skill set.
About it.
No. I disagree there. Even today, I don't think you know 80% of what I do, because that is a skill I can't make you see. You can't see my word screen when I'm talking to an author. So this is just for editing. I'm saying maybe maybe a musician's parents don't like the kind of music they play. So they do not know the skill. Or like my mom said, chef, आपको कोरियन खाना पसंद ही नहीं है, क्या है ये, नहीं पता kimchi क्या होता है. So how do you convince them? That conviction comes from your confidence in it. And if they're not convinced, which again might happen unfortunately, then you just have to follow the path, be happy.
So, can you tell me, when did this all begin? Like, when did the love for reading start, and did it come like naturally to her, or was it like you had to make any special effort to direct her towards reading while she was growing up?
She was introduced to book since inception. I would say I was studying, and I was in my final year of MA psychology, and she has grown up from that point. Reading psychology, and when she was born, everybody would, just before her birth, 2 days before her birth, it was my final practical exam. And as she started growing, we never saw her indulging in any kind of naughty behavior. She would always be found sitting in one corner and reading a book. That was one thing which I would say I didn't have to ever insist. I would bring books and I would take her along to bookshops and book exhibitions, and even during school PTMs we have those bookshops where there are books are displayed. So I would buy her those books, and she was a natural reader. I didn't have to do much about it, but we always used to sit and read stories. I would say as a role model, when you see your parents doing it, you naturally pick it up. But it was quite natural in her case, which is not true for my son, I would say.
So turns out, since you both have been, like readers at a time when social media was not there, why do you think, or what do you think people today was swamped by social media and OTT platforms where, effortless content is available for consumption? Why in all of this should anyone read a book, or what should they be doing?
So as a teacher and a counselor, I would say, why should you read? It is language development. For every learning begins with reading. If I have to initiate language development in my child, I have to, make them to read. And picking up not only vocabulary, to writing sentences, to bringing that what you are reading into your writing, make it an effective communication. Everything begins with reading. That's my take on this. Further, I think Shreya is much more equipped to handle this question.
So I think it's imperative that people read what they like to read naturally. I'm not bonded to any form. I wouldn't say necessarily pick up a book. If you're comfortable reading a long article in a good magazine online, go for it. If you think reading a thread on Twitter has added value to your life, go for it. If you're adapting reading via audiobooks or podcasts, sure, if that's your jam, go for it. But I think what is more important is improving the kind of content you're consuming, because at the end of the day, your brain is a sponge. And if you're going to fill it up with nonsensical, low effort content that does not challenge you, that does not enrich you, that does not even actually entertain you, because if you binge watch a show on Netflix, it leaves you feeling hollow. But if you binge read a book, it leaves you feeling satiated. It's the same thing as eating something which is protein heavy and is a balanced meal, as opposed to eating something from McDonald's. That joy is very limited. The ramifications of it are longer, and books just help you imagine more. And they're also authoritative sources of information if you are into non-fiction. They've been vetted, they've been written with a lot of thought, they've been cross-checked, and I think if you're able to choose good books and read better, you will also be able to make better choices in life per se, as far as where you want to devote your time, because we only have 24 hours in a day, last I checked.
So, a lot of reading that happens today is with an end result in mind. Chalo, ya to let's do self-improvement using a self-help book, or maybe, let's improve our writing skills. Reading is, important to better our writing skills also. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, a lot of reading is happening with an end result in mind. Kuch benefit karna chahiye reading se. तो ये पूरे चीज में where is reading fiction, even going to stand? Like, कहाँ है fiction?
देखो, people who say कि fiction पढ़ना is waste of time, सबसे बेकार लोग लगते हैं मुझे ऐसे. ठीक है? I take serious offense to it. There is nothing more well researched than a work of fiction. To build a world, to make you believe that world exists, whether it is set in our timeline historically or in the future, or if it's dystopian, it requires so much effort, and that effort is visible because you as a reader are transported to that land. Those are things then there's empathy that only fiction can teach you. It also helps you experience things which you may never have. Like, I remember I went through this phase that I was only reading books set in France, and I became obsessed with that culture. I read historical fiction set in France, crime, even children's books, because I wanted to see what values were they imparting their children. And it's very different from what they teach in France to what they teach in India versus what they teach in Russia. And that's very interesting to know that right from a beginning, the what cultures focus on what values. So I think you must read a healthy mix of fiction and non-fiction. And also, you should not always be reading in the quest for knowledge or improvement. Sometimes you read just to enjoy. And it is because we equate reading with improving ourselves, it becomes boring. So read to enjoy, and it's great entertainment. Plus, you'll always sound smarter and you'll look smarter. You'll look hot with a book. If even for just those vanity reasons, just pick up a book and read it.
Oh my God.
I would like to add here, like I teach through stories. So I always say, when you have to teach abstract concepts, like as she said, values, integrity, empathy, honesty, child would not know what is honesty, what does it mean to be empathetic. To give them a story, which is a pure fictional work, but the value that is given through a story. Panchatantra is all fiction, but we have learned all through Panchatantra or whatever magazines we used to read or comic books. So we learn so much of it. All those values are picked up from those books. So fiction, of course, teaches us a lot, and there is a lot we can learn from it in terms of language again. So it's also second thing, as she's very rightly said, we always do not focus it कि ये पढ़ना है, ये सीखने के लिए मुझे ये पढ़ना है. कई बार हम पढ़ने लगते हैं और उसमें जो सीख है वो अपने आप आ जाती है. हर बार motive based नहीं होता. So when you start reading, like with kids, whenever we read stories, वो बच्चे को वो कहते हैं don't always give a moral. इस कहानी से हमें ये शिक्षा मिलती है. वो जो शिक्षा मिल रही है, let the child decide. That so had I been in protagonist's shoes, how I would have solved this problem. So they learn to think for themselves. What would I have done in this? हम story को आधा छोड़ देते हैं, and we ask them, okay, how you would take this forward. If we don't have this ending and you would like to change the end and give your ending to the same story, how would you take it forward? So then you are giving room for creativity, for thinking, for problem solving. So this is what you learn from stories and from fiction, I would say.
Yeah. So to sum up our talk today, there's been so much talk about reading books in general and career shifts. Can you all, recommend a few books to all those watching this video?
I think the first one I would suggest is something that just genuinely covers this topic is Everything is Out of Syllabus by Varun Dugidala. It literally talks about how, by the way, he was also an engineer, and now look where he's at. And he did his engineering in, I think, 5 years. So society would mark that or brand that as failure. And how from that place where he didn't know what he wanted to do, to realizing what he was passionate about, converting that passion into a strong, successful business where he's a leader. He's been very candid in it, and I saw a lot of what I should have learned in school in the book. So highly recommend that for sure. Also, it's slim, so you can finish it in a day or two. That would be my first recommendation. Mom, do you have any?
Atomic Habits by James Clear. Because I feel habit formation, whichever place you are in as a even as a professional, if your habits are not in place, be it eating or keeping things in place, you are going to suffer on some account. So that's one part where I feel that's mandatory for every person to have fixed set of habits. Then as I'm reading this holistic psychologist, I follow her also on Instagram. This helps you overcome your inner child problems or your attachment styles or whatever you've suffered through parenthood and what kind of relations you've had with your parents. It helps you heal within yourself. And 7 Habits of Most Effective People is also one of the good books. Then How to Win Friends and Influence People. These are must reads. These books are like classics everybody should have read for having a good, successful life. I'm more into reading psychology books. So if I suggest, it will always be those. This one, Looking Inwards, which you've recently published, this is also very good. When you want to turn inwards, we are always, one thing I want to suggest here for the younger generation, people like you, we are always looking, we say locus of control is always given to other people for our own happiness. If you turn inwards and see that it is me who is responsible and I have to have the key to my happiness, you'll feel less stressed in life, because your only person you can control is yourself. So outside your locus of control, you have no control. So stop getting stressed over other people's behavior.
Okay, so
that's also another very good read.
One fiction book that I can recommend is called There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job. I think it's perfect for every millennial who hates their job and is feeling stuck, because in this, the protagonist changes many jobs and realizes with each that none of them seem to fit. And I'm not going to tell you the end, because if I tell you the end, it'll seem like, oh, acha, haan, we figured that out already. So it's a beautiful book on that places a lot of importance in terms of, also resetting your system. But maybe you're actually in a really good space, but you're just burnt out or tired and you're not seeing the merit in where you are. Also, it places too much focus on, shifting and changing and upping and upskilling. Sometimes you're just happy where you are, but the world makes you feel inadequate. And this book really helped me sort of ground myself there and say, okay, you know what? Life is good. And it is not as bad as this protagonist. So I would highly recommend that book. It's a big read, but read it in chunks and you should be good.
So, it was such a fun conversation and it was so nice and homely, and there was so much talks about reading and reading books and everything. Can you, either of you or together, just summarize with a quick tip or quick advice to our readers?
Most of my books come through her only, and as I read for children, I always feel that I think different topics is extremely important. Like in my channel, if you see, we've talked about gender sensitization, we've talked about empathy, we've talked about compassion. So every story will lead you to a different topic and gives you a different perspective, which is extremely important. You should not stick to just reading one kind of book. I read only this. Because then you will be getting, more accumulation of knowledge will be only on those lines. But if you read different genres, you will have your windows will open up and you will have different perspectives from different kind of authors. That's my take on this.
Yeah, me
I've subscribed to Medium. I keep reading different blogs from different kind of authors, and I read as every night I just read 4-5 articles from different kind of different topics. So even whether I'm learning or not, at least I'm reading something good. I feel good after reading that. This is why you should add different kinds of reading.
I would like to say that if you feel stuck in terms of reading, if you feel through Bookstagram and everything that people talk about that you're not being able to just pick up a book and finish it, be easy on yourself, be kind. The last 3 years have been really rough, and it's, focusing on reading is natural for some but very unnatural to others. So definitely pick out books which you like if you're trying to build a habit, and don't get pressured into just thinking that, oh, if you haven't read the Tolstoys and the Dickens of the world, you're not a reader. If you read, you're a reader. And I mean, once you start liking the habit, there is no way that you won't fall in love with it and then explore all its facets. So be kind to yourself also is what I'd say.